in one fundamental supreme being referred to as Brahma. However, they believe that Brahma can take human and animal forms. So they worship Brahma in the form of human beings and animals. So though they philosophically hold that they are worshipping one God, in practice, in reality, they are worshipping human beings, animals, and bits of stone. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind. When people worship trees and sticks and stones and people, some of their prayers are answered. Because a Christian will say, well, worshipping Jesus is right because when I prayed to Jesus, my prayers were answered. And the Hindu will say, worshipping Shiva or Vishnu is right because when I prayed to Shiva, my prayers were answered. And somebody somewhere who's worshipping a tree will say, worshipping this tree is right because when I pray to the tree, my prayers are answered. For sure, this does happen. Because if prayers were not answered, when people worship trees or people or animals, etc., then people would stop worshiping these things. So we cannot use the criterion of prayers being answered as determining whether this worship is right or wrong. Because those Christians who hear of people worshipping idols will say that worship is wrong. It is not acceptable. It is against the teachings of God. However, they themselves also worship a man and hold that it is right because their prayers were answered. But also the prayers of those who worship the trees, the animals, and the stones, etc., their prayers are also answered. The point is that it is God who answers prayers. It is the one true God who answers prayers. And this worship of other than God is not answered by the objects that are being worshipped. It is God alone who is answering the prayers. Islam teaches that, as I said, there is a clear distinction between the Creator and the created. God is God. When you make Him less than God, when you make Him a man, then He is no longer God. Some people will say, well, don't you believe that God can do all things? We say, yes, we believe that God can do all things which befits Him as being God. Anything which makes Him not God, we say no. These are not amongst the things that we say God can do. Because it goes against, it's not something which is acceptable within the realm of the things when we say God can do all things. All things that keep Him God. If something makes Him less than God, then there will be things greater than Him. You know, philosophers who don't believe in God, they like to play with Christians and others who believe in God by proposing to them a question which creates confusion in the minds of those Christians and others. They say, okay, you believe that God can do all things. Can God make a stone that is too heavy for Him to lift? You've got a problem here. When you say God can do all things, when you say, yes, He can make a stone which is too heavy for Him to lift, then what in fact you're saying is that that stone will be greater than God. You see, and one of the characteristics of God is that He is the greatest. This is what we say, Muslims say in their call to prayer. Allahu Akbar. Allah, God, the one God, He is the greatest. There is nothing greater than Him. That is one of the fundamental characteristics of God. Which when you make God a part of His creation, when you make Him a man, then in fact what you're doing is making Him less than other men. Because when Christians made God Jesus, then according to their beliefs, other men came and killed Jesus. They were greater than Jesus. But God is greater than all. He cannot be killed. He is not a part of His creation. Muslims believe that God is distinct, different, not a part of His creation. And when you accept the idea that God is a part of creation, mixed into the creation somehow, somewhere, some people say, oh, God is in everybody's heart. The heart, is the temple of God. Or the soul is divine. It's God, it's a part of God. These kind of beliefs, this makes God a part of His creation. And when someone who is worshipping a stone, when you say to him, why are you worshipping the stone? And he says, well, actually I'm not worshipping the stone, but I'm worshipping God who is present in the stone, then you are stuck. You have to accept this as worship of God. But no, true religion has always taught that one should not bow down in worship to other than God. So, the fundamental difference, I said, between Islam and all of the other systems is that it alone teaches that God alone deserves to be worshipped. And this is something which is a part of our nature. We all know it. We all realize it inside of ourselves, that God alone deserves to be worshipped. God is not a man. He is not a stick and a stone. He is beyond His creation.